Well, good evening. How you doing? Welcome along to my daily sort of Belfast bedtime story from the 1970s. I'm on here every weekday evening reading a chapter from my memoir, Paperboy, and I hope it brings a bit of some memories and also just a bit of company in these days when we're all staying at home on lockdown. I hope you're doing okay. Hope you're keeping well and staying positive during these difficult times for the whole world. Actually, it's been amazing over the past uh, a few weeks as I've been doing this to see people from all over the world watching these videos of me reading the different chapters. I think last night we had Australia, New Zealand, Canada, Uganda, and Norway, and of course good old Northern Ireland as well, listening in. So you're very welcome from wherever you're coming from. Hello again, Mary Black. Good to have you. Hi, Alan McLean. Never misses. Good man, fellow Doctor Who fan like me, and it's good to have you all along. And this evening I'm going to read chapter 8 from Paperboy. And so welcome, Jim and Carol and Sharon, Kenneth, and Nigel. Hi, Kenneth Glenville from the States too. Good to have you here. And so tonight I'm going to read chapter 8. And chapter 8 of Paperboy is called Good Living. I got saved on a bin at the caravan, so I did. Uncle John, the Good News Club leader, said I had put my sin in the bin. I felt very clean on the inside, even though I was never very clean on the outside at the caravan. The only time I came into contact with water there was whenever we took a paddle in the Irish Sea on the days the sun came out. There was an electric shower at the caravan, and it took 50p coins for 10 minutes. But there was always a queue, and I preferred to keep my 50p's for the dodgems at the amusement arcade in Malile. The caravan we went to every summer was in Ballywhiskin, on the outskirts of the County Down seaside resort of Malile. It was also known as Shankle-on-Sea, because the whole road went there for the 12th fortnight, and our family was no exception. If the Shankle was the heartland of loyalist Ulster, then Malile was the loyalist Riviera. Beside the sea, though, even though it was July and the middle of the marching season, the tartan gangs never looked as tough in Malile somehow. When they took off their Rangers tops and licked 99s in the sunshine, they looked too soft, white and skinny for kicking your head in. As you strolled along the seafront, even the skinheads shouting, "Who the fuck are you looking at?" in the sunlight seemed less intimidating when they were simultaneously tackling a pink candy floss. My parents bought a second-hand caravan on hire purchase at the start of the Troubles. It was a major financial commitment. Only a lot of overtime at the foundry and a lot of sewing for posh ladies made it happen. The said caravan was a static on 4 legs, not a touring model like rich people with tweed car coats had. It was a Pemberton. That meant it was rather plush. Adding the word Pemberton before caravan, adding the word respray after Ford Escort. It meant you were a cut above the rest of your street. My mother always said the word Pemberton quite loudly when talking to anyone about our caravan while in the post office queue. This was something to shout about. The Pemberton had mustard upholstery, a gas grill where I singed my eyebrows toasting Vita, and an amazing pull-down bed which your grandparents could sleep on if they came down for the weekend and got too drunk and embarrassed your parents in a pub in Malile and then slept for a long time while your father vowed never again. The best place in the caravan, however, was the bedroom I shared with my big brother. It had bunk beds, the most exciting of all beds, with our own little window to look out at the dump next door to the caravan site. My big brother let me have the top bunk on the unspoken understanding that this did not imply in any way that he was not top dog in any other circumstance. I loved the reassuring sound of summer rain dancing on the caravan roof when I was tucked up in my bunk bed a long day of one-armed bandits, fish suppers, and beachcombing. For me, it was the most comforting drumming sound of summer. We had many happy times in our wee tin box in the rain in a field, so we did. From the main windows, you had a lovely view of the beach and the sea beyond the dump. Some of the parents were constantly complaining, saying that the dump should be filled in, but the kids enjoyed catapulting the rats and playing in the old car that rested there year in, year out. We shared our field beside the dump with 20 other families in caravans of all shapes and sizes. They weren't all from the Shankill. Some of our caravan neighbours, including Big Ruby, who taught me how to kiss properly in the sand dunes, were from more exotic places I had never been to, like the Newton Arch Road. The 1969 Pemberton was mainly our holiday home, but my father made it clear that it was always there if we ever needed to get out of Belfast in a hurry. It was reassuring to know that if we got burnt out, at least we had somewhere to go to. I had dreams of being a refugee in Malile, driven from my home by the IRA in balaclavas and exiled to a life of dodgems and dulce on the County Down coast. But things never got bad enough, and by the time my wee brother and I were paperboys, the caravan was beginning to lose its attraction. We had work to do, paper money to collect on Fridays, and ulsters to deliver on Saturdays. Malile wasn't within the commuter belt for paperboys. I was 8 years old when I asked Jesus into my heart on the bin at the caravan. The Good News Club was a wee meeting for children every day for a week in July. There the aunts and uncles, volunteers from the Baptist Church in Newry, would encourage us all to get saved. Every day, all the kids emptied out of the caravans to go to the Good News Club. It was brilliant fun, especially if you had already lost all your pocket money in the slot machines in Malile, read your Whizzer and Chip Summer Special 5 times, and were bored with trying to find live crabs in the rock pools at the beach. We played games and Bible quizzes and won pencils and rubbers and rulers with John 3:16 on them. We sang wee choruses about Jesus with guitars. And aunt and uncle would hold up a big book with words of the song on it, and this usually had illustrations of boys and girls crosses. One of my favourite choruses was a song called Good News. For this one, the songbook had pictures of a paperboy with a cap and an armful of newspapers, and when it came to the last line, we had to shout out the word extra, like a paperboy shouting in the street. I confess, I sometimes got distracted from the good news itself because I was too busy imagining I would be a paperboy shouting extra round the streets of Belfast. Little did I know then, my dream would come true in just a few short years. The aunts and uncles were very young and happy for religious people, and thankfully my father noticed this and I was allowed to go to the wee meetings. Dad was an atheist, although my mother was Presbyterian. He said religion was all superstitious twaddle, but he had agreed that his children could be christened in the Presbyterian church because my mother was a believer, and just in case it would be bad luck not to get us done. I would meet a few more atheists. David Pritchard, for example, who told me he had stopped believing in God because he said religion was a crutch for weak people. My father's father was also dead, so I wondered if God only existed when he kept your father alive. Atheists at Belfast Royal Academy were not uncommon, but it was quite unusual to be a non-believer on the Shankill. All the murals on the gable walls said we were for God and Ulster, although I noticed most people were really much more for Ulster than for God. So while I was allowed to go to Sunday school, I was generally forbidden to go into any wee meetings where my father thought I might be brainwashed by the born-agains. However, he had noticed that the aunts and uncles at the Good News Club were very young and friendly compared to the gospel tract distributors at home, and he was surprised to see the women were actually allowed to wear jeans. So he relaxed the rules at the caravan. Even though I was allowed to go to the wee meetings, I was aware of my father's concerns that I could be brainwashed, which I knew was what they sometimes did to people in James Bond movies. But no one at the Good News Club was from Russia, or ever locked me in a room and strapped me to a chair in the dark to force me to get born again. Instead, the aunts and uncles in their jeans told us stories from the Bible and the amazing adventures of heroic missionaries saving the natives in Africa and China. We sang choruses about Jesus taking away all our sin, and for a while I forgot about Belfast and barricades and the 11 plus and everything. We sat on a huge blanket on the grass on sunny days, but when it was rainy, we met inside a small caravan or in the bungalow at the entrance to the caravan site where the owner stored the new bins. These shiny aluminium bins became sacred. They were our pews. It was in the summer of 1972 that I got saved, the same year as Bloody Friday in Belfast, when the bloody Munich Olympics were on TV, and bloody Donny Osmond was #1 with Puppy Love. I was jealous of Donny because all the girls fancied him. However, I'd always liked Jesus at Sunday school. He seemed kinder than God and more human than Donny. God was definitely a good, sound Ulster Protestant, but he was always wagging his finger at me like a grumpy old orange man. God was like a big cosmic Paisley, only not as popular in our street. On the other hand, Jesus, according to the wee choruses we sang in Sunday school, loved me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. He even loved me in the King James Version. God locked up the swings in Woodville Park on a Sunday, but Jesus loved all the little children of the world. It occurred to me that if he did indeed love red and yellow, black and white, and if they were all really precious in his sight, then he might even love the green, the same as the orange. Maybe Catholics and Protestants were no more different than the radio times and the TV times. Alternative formats, one a bit heavier than the other, but basically the same content. I kept this heresy to myself, though. I knew it was unlikely to win me a prize in Ballygamartin Presbyterian Church on Children's Day. Sitting on the bin at the caravan site that summer day in 1972, it had all seemed so simple. I did bad stuff. Jesus wanted to wash it all away, so I asked him to. But even when I got back to our caravan that day and talked about my spiritual encounter, I discovered there was so much more to it than that. Granda paused from a sip of stout to say I had been led up the garden path. I wasn't sure what that meant, but it made me feel stupid. Next, Dad expressed concerns I couldn't quite grasp. Something about no son of mine being brainwashed by no born-again bigots. It seemed a born-again son was an atheist father's worst nightmare. Worst of all, Granny then started to cry and said it was tears of joy, like when Paisley got elected. She said she thought it was lovely that I'd become a wee good living boy, and that maybe one day I would become a minister. And then she added cryptically, especially with him and his bad heart and all. Although upset, I knew I must humbly absorb all of these remarks as a martyr to my newfound faith. If the missionaries in the stories at the Good News Club got beaten and eaten, then I should be able to cope with these persecutions. I prayed sincerely that all of them too would be saved, and also that this bad heart of mine, now with Jesus inside it, would keep on beating. So let's see who we got along this evening. I just want to say hello to everyone. Thanks for joining me. Who have we got here? Chris Tracy, long time no see. I hope you're staying well, Chris. Hello, hello. Bevan, nice to have you. And hello, Anya Bonner, good to have you. Hi, Ian Parsley. Hello, Francis. Marty McCauley, good to see you again. Sadie Hannah, hi again. Good to have you from California. The lovely Leslie's with me. And hello, Jackie. And Brenda, how are you? Hi, Christine. Good to have you along. And Anne Kirk, hi Anne. Hello, Sean O'Boy, long time no see. And Mike Moran. Hi, Joy, hope you're doing fine. Hello, Hazel and Jackie. Hi, Pete in San Diego. Thanks for coming along. Hello, Philip, hope you're well. Hello, my beautiful Bethy, my daughter, and Jerry and Andy and Thomas and Carol. It's great to have you all along this evening. So I'm going to continue reading from chapter 8 of Paperboy about being a wee good living fella. When I returned home from Malile, I soon learned the full truth about the whole religious package I had so spontaneously embraced. The burden of it all soon became heavier than a paper bag when you had 30 extra tellies to carry because one of the other paper boys was off to the clinic with nits. For a start, the Shankle was coming down with churches. There were even more churches than pubs. If you fell out with the minister in one church, as lots of people did, you could always join or even start another church in the next street. Lots of old men in church always talked how in the 1859 revival everyone had got saved in tents. They said we should all pray for it to happen again. But it never did. Maybe God was fed up with us being more for Ulster than for him. Because the more they prayed for revival, the more people I knew stopped going to church. I remember how one Sunday, it was during the first year of my Paperboy delivery days, when the Reverend Lowe, our regular minister, was away on holiday, and we had a visiting minister with a turn in his eye. This man took it upon himself to explain to us the difference between all the churches. The Presbyterian Church is as near as humanly possible to the church on earth that God intended, he announced. I was shocked by this, because in our church the roof was leaking and the organ kept breaking down. I searched the visiting minister's face for an impish smile, but such an expression was clearly a stranger to his visage. He was serious. I knew Protestants were God's chosen people, but I didn't think Presbyterians were perfect, and our church certainly wasn't. The church bells blasted out from a cassette tape recorder plugged into big speakers in the bell tower every Sunday morning because we couldn't afford real bells, which no one would have known how to ring anyway. One Sunday morning, someone put on the wrong tape, and instead of the church bells chiming out, we had Philomena Begley singing One Day at a Time, and she was a Catholic. Titch McCracken's cousin from Ballymoney had told me when he was down visiting that Ulster Protestants were the last descendants of the lost tribe of Israel. He was very convincing, but when I looked up Israel in my geography atlas, I concluded that either Titch's cousin was wrong, or we were a very lost tribe indeed. Having established that we were the champions as far as religion went, the visiting minister then turned his attention to the other churches. The most obvious target was first. The Roman Catholic Church is corrupt and evil, and its misguided adherents are doomed to hellfire and damnation, he declared. That always went down very well on the Shankle. This man knew how to get an audience on his side. Its Pope is the Antichrist. Now, I had heard this one before, but I always thought the Pope looked like quite a nice man, and when I stared very close at him on John Craven's news round, I could never make out a 666 on his forehead. Anyway, the Antichrist was Damien from the Omen. The Church of Ireland is so close to the Church of Rome as to be indistinguishable. It is not a Christian church, and its people are in error, the minister continued. I was shocked again. My guitar teacher, Mr. Rowing, and his wife were Church of Ireland, and they seemed so much kinder than this man. And Mr. Rowing's only error was not to teach me the Mull of Kintyre. The Methodists have departed from the truth to serve a social gospel, he pontificated. I think that meant they help poor people. Now I was getting angry. The Reverend Lowe never made me angry like this. The Methodists at the Grosvenor Hall had taken my mother on holidays to Bangor when she was a poor wee girl with nothing. They neglect the sinner's need to make Jesus their own and personal saviour, he elaborated. My pompous preacher friend next went on to explain that we should not waste money by sending food to Africans because we need to send missionaries to get them saved first, as that was more important. I couldn't work out how you could give them salvation if they'd already died of starvation. Then he turned his eye on the smaller denominations, the Baptists and the Pentecostals. All the rest are nothing but little tin-hot Christians, he said. He didn't even cite a verse from the Bible to back this one up. This final condemnation was the most confusing of all, because I knew from listening to Mrs. Piper in our street and from some of my friends in school that Baptists thought Presbyterians weren't Christians, and Brethren and Pentecostals said we weren't saved either. Leaving the church behind that morning, I tried to avoid eye contact with this man as he shook hands at the door, but his errant eye seemed to follow me nonetheless. On the Shankill, a good living person was someone who had put their hand up to get saved at a gospel meeting, otherwise known as a wee meeting. This usually happened at the end of the wee meeting. For about half an hour, the preacher asked you to raise your hand if you wanted to be saved, while the organist played 15 verses of the hymn, Just As I Am. That usually gave you enough time. Some people I knew got saved every week. They got born again and again. Once you were saved, you didn't curse or drink or smoke or go to the cinema or discos. If you had done any of these sins a lot before you were saved, you got asked to give your testimony at wee meetings, and you stood up and you told everyone all the worst sins you had ever committed in great detail. The biggest sinners were the best. I found all of this spiritually perplexing. The list of what you weren't allowed to do got longer every day. You weren't allowed to watch TV on a Sunday or buy a raffle ticket, even for an African baby. Of course, it was worse for girls. They had lots of extras they weren't allowed to do, like wear trousers or speak. I was baffled. I thought it was all supposed to have something to do with Jesus. But soon after my road to Damascus moment on the bin in Malai, neighbours and relatives, when trying to distinguish me from my two brothers, started referring to me as the wee good living one. My older brother had put his hand up at a meeting once and got saved, but he said fuck twice the next week and gave it up. And my wee brother was still too young to put his hand up at all. The only thing worse than being called good living was that you were always described as wee. You couldn't just be a good living fella, you had to be a wee good living boy. At a certain point, I was taller than both my brothers, but I was the one that was being called wee. I faithfully attended and remained true to the principles of the Good News Club until well into my time as a paperboy. And so Mrs. Mac called me a wee good living boy too. I put up with it because I just knew I was her favourite paperboy. Good living meant no thieving in her Mac's accounts right to the last halfpenny. Mrs. Mac was a tough old Belfast woman like my granny, a bit scary but with a warm heart. She didn't curse quite as much as Owl Mac, but she could give him a good run for his money. If Mrs. Beattie from number 21 complained about you leaving her gate open or letting her Jack Russell out or giving her cheek after she'd called you a lazy wee skitter. Mrs. Mac was quite glamorous for her age. She used a dual cigarette holder like an American woman in the black and white movies, so she didn't have yellow fingers like Owl Mac. Her hands were elegant even when they were black with newspapers, and she had fancy handwriting when she wrote the addresses of the magazines. She looked like one of those old film star actresses interviewed on Parkinson on a Saturday night, who looked better in black and white and too pink on colour TV. Mrs. Mac had red painted nails and big gold rings on nearly all of her fingers. This was evidence of what some of the other paper boys used to say about the Macs. "Them uns is loaded." But I couldn't see how selling newspapers could make you all that rich. Perhaps they had won Spot the Ball in one of their millions of Belfast telegraphs. Mrs. Mac had a beehive too, which my mother told me was all the rage in the 60s. I knew this was true because Cilla Black and Petula Clark had beehives on the old LP covers in our stereogram in the sitting room. One 11th night, I had to leave the paper money round to the Mac's house as the shop was already closed for the 12th. When she came to the door, Mrs. Mac was in a wonderful mood. She was winking at Owl Mac and laughing a lot, and she seemed on her feet than usual. "Thanks, love," she said, taking the bag full of warm and fragrant coins, fresh from my Dr. Martens. As I was leaving her house with my burdens lightened, carefully closing her gate tight after me, she called out to me, "Enjoy yourself at the Boney the night, son. That's a good boy." As I turned back to thank her, I'm sure I heard a muted fart, and a lock of long hair fell forlornly out of the beehive across her tortoise-shell glasses. I had never heard before. The day after the guy had put a gun in my back, my father brought me round to the Macs to explain the whole drama. Their house was full of gold-framed mirrors, copper bubble wallpaper, and china dogs on every available windowsill. There was not a newspaper in sight. When he heard about the Shawaddy-Waddy guy, Owl Mac was furious. I thought he was going to spit out one of his looser teeth. But poor Mrs. Mac was just very shocked and concerned. She gave me a big hug, looked at my father with tears welling up in her eyes, and then cocked her head to one side and she said, "And him a wee good living boy too." So there you are. That's chapter 8 of Paperboy. So let's say hello to a few more who've been listening. Hello, Betty O'Riordan. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Hi, Richard and Alan. Alan, son of the legendary Bread Man. That's the next book. Hello, David Rock. Hi, John McKegney. Hello, Susan Wilgar. Yeah, Susan Wilgar's a great supporter of my books and the musical and everything. Hi, Greta in Norway. Lovely to have you again. And Marie Hall from Wasaga. Lovely to have you along. Mona Trainer, good to have you here. Well, I hope you enjoyed chapter 8 of Paperboy. I'll be back here live on Facebook, 9 o'clock from Port Stewart, Northern Ireland tomorrow night, where I'll be continuing the story and I'll be reading chapter 9. Until then, stay home, stay safe, and stay well. Bye for now.